All right, so we've been talking about polygons and even more specifically getting down to quadrilaterals. That means it has how many sides? Four. And then we got even more specific and went with parallelograms. Parallelograms have properties. The very first property is most obvious because it's right in the word. What is it? Parallel. So what about parallel? The opposite sides are parallel. So I'm going to use that double hockey stick, which is shorthand for parallel. So opposite sides on a parallelogram are parallel. Not only are those opposite sides parallel, they're also what? Congruent. So you're going to write opposite sides are congruent. Right. Both those first two items are on the outside. Now let's go inside to our angles. So here's an angle. This opposite angle over here is what? Congruent. So opposite angles are congruent. But what about consecutive angles? So angles that come one right after each other. What are those? Supplementary. So you're going to say consecutive, and we're going to abbreviate it. Consecutive angles are supplementary. Supplementary is how many degrees? Right? They are going to equal or add up to 180 degrees. Okay? There's one more item that has to do with the parallelogram. Anybody know what it is? The corner to corner. What do you draw in there? Diagonal. So the diagonals do what to each other? The diagonals bisect each other. All right, so we spent a couple days talking about parallelograms, and then we talked about our three special parallelograms. So there's a rectangle, there's a rhombus, and a square. All three of these figures, they're all parallelograms. So for the first item, you're going to draw a parallelogram. They have all the properties that a parallelogram has. So all five of these items apply to all three of these. Okay? They're all parallelograms. Then they have additional properties because they're so special. Okay? The one that we're going to write next is basically their definition. So on a rectangle, you have 4 right angles. That's how many degrees? 90. I think 90. And then on a rhombus, you have 4 congruent sides. So rectangle special. What's special about it is it has 4 right angles, and what's special about a rhombus is that it has 4 congruent sides. So a square is both a rectangle and a rhombus, so it actually has both. It has 4 right angles and 4 congruent sides. Somebody needs to turn their phone off. All right, on a rectangle, there is one additional property. Has to do with the inside of the rectangle. From corner to corner, we draw a what? Diagonal. On a rectangle, those diagonals are what? Congruent, right? They're congruent. So when they're in the parallelogram, they bisect each other, and if it's even more specifically a rectangle, not only do they bisect each other, but they're also congruent. So they're both of those. All right? Rhombus, the 2 additional also have to do with the diagonals. Diagonals are pretty important. So on a rhombus, anybody know what the diagonals do? They bisect the opposite angles. And number 3 is that they are perpendicular. So you can draw that capital upside down T. Okay, perpendicular. All right. So rectangle and rhombus have those special properties going for them. All right. Square. What's special about a square? Right. Notice these two arrows are both coming to a square because a square is a rectangle and a square is a rhombus. So number 3 is that a square is a rectangle. And number 4 is that a square is also a rhombus.